93%. That is not a typo. 93% of people will go through their entire lives without building any meaningful wealth. They will work for 40 years. They will earn hundreds of thousands, maybe millions, of dollars over the course of their lifetime. And at the end of it, they will have almost nothing to show for it. Not because they were lazy, not because the economy was against them, though sometimes it was. Not because they lacked intelligence or opportunity or ambition. But because of something that nobody ever sat them down and explained. Something that lives not in their bank account, but in their psychology. Something that was operating quietly, efficiently, and almost completely invisibly from the moment they were old enough to understand what money was. Today, I am going to show you what that is. I am going to show you the precise psychological mechanism that separates the 7% who build real wealth from the 93% who spend their entire lives wondering why it never came together. And I'm going to show you that the difference between those two groups has almost nothing to do with what most people think it does. Stay with me, because what you are about to hear might be the most important thing you have ever learned about money. Let me start with a number that should stop you cold. According to the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances, the most comprehensive study of American household wealth, the bottom 60% of Americans own just 2.6% of the nation's total wealth. 2.6% for 60% of the population. Now, the typical response to a statistic like that is to blame the system. And the system deserves blame. It is genuinely, measurably unfair in ways that matter enormously. But here is what that response misses. Within that bottom 60%, within that same system, facing the same structural barriers, there are people who are building. Slowly, imperfectly, against the odds, building something real. And there are people who are not, and the difference between them is not income. Studies consistently show that lottery winners, people who received sudden, massive wealth, return to their previous financial level within 5 years in the majority of cases. The difference is not education. Some of the most financially stuck people I have ever studied have advanced degrees. The difference is not even opportunity, because opportunity without the psychology to recognize and act on it is invisible. The difference, the single most powerful variable separating the people who build wealth from the people who do not, is the relationship between their identity and their money. Specifically, whether they see themselves as someone wealth is possible for. Not in theory, for them personally, and that specific, deeply personal belief is where everything begins. Or ends. Let me explain how this works at the neurological level. Your brain contains a system called the reticular activating system, the RAS. It is essentially a filter. Because your brain receives approximately 11 million bits of information per second, and your conscious mind can only process about 40 of them. The RAS decides which 40 make it through, and here is the critical part. The RAS filters based on what it believes is relevant to you, based on your identity. Based on the story your brain holds about who you are and what kind of life is possible for you. If your identity says, "I am not someone who builds wealth," your RAS will filter out the opportunities, the connections, the information, and the moments of insight that could have changed your financial trajectory. Not because they were not there, but because your brain decided they were not relevant to you. This is why two people can be in the same room, hear the same conversation, read the same book, and walk away with completely different things. One person hears an opportunity, the other hears noise. The difference is not intelligence, the difference is identity. And identity at this level is not something you choose consciously. It is something that was built by your environment, by the beliefs of the people around you, by the experiences that shaped your nervous system before you had any capacity to evaluate them critically. Let me tell you about two men who grew up on the same street, same neighborhood, same school, same economic starting point. By 40, their financial lives looked completely different. The first man, call him Marcus, had built a small but real foundation. Not wealthy by any dramatic standard, but stable, growing, intentional. The second man, call him James, was in almost exactly the same financial position he had been in at 22. Different jobs, different apartments, same bank balance, same debt patterns. Same feeling of running in place no matter how hard he worked. When researchers study cases like this, and there is a significant body of research on exactly this kind of divergence, what they consistently find is not a difference in intelligence, in work ethic, or in opportunity. What they find is a difference in one specific psychological variable: the degree to which each person believed at a deep felt, embodied level that financial progress was something that happened to people like them. Marcus, somewhere in his history, had received evidence, a mentor, an experience, a moment of exposure that planted a different seed. A seed that said, "This is possible for someone like you." James had never received that evidence, and without it, his brain had defaulted to the financial template most readily available to it. The one inherited from his environment, the one that said, "People from here do not get ahead, not out loud, never out loud." But in every small signal, every repeated pattern, every story told and untold about what money meant in the world he grew up in. And that template, running quietly in the background, shaped every financial decision James made for the next 20 years. Without him ever knowing it was there, this is the mechanism. This is the precise psychological process that keeps 93% of people from building the wealth they are capable of. Not the economy, not bad luck, not a lack of information. A financial identity installed in childhood, running on autopilot, filtering out possibility, engineering outcomes consistent with a story that was never theirs to begin with. So what separates the 7%? What is actually different about the people who build wealth from environments and circumstances that produced financial stagnation for almost everyone around them? I want to be careful here, because the internet is full of people who will tell you the answer is mindset, as if thinking positively is a substitute for structural change. It is not, and anyone who tells you otherwise is selling something. The 7% are not simply people who believed harder, but they do share something that the 93% largely do not. And it is more specific than the word mindset captures. What they share is this: at some point in their lives, through whatever combination of experience, exposure, and choice, they updated their financial identity. They stopped operating from the inherited template, the one that said this is not for someone like you, and started operating from a new one. One that said, "I do not know exactly how yet, but I am the kind of person who figures this out." That shift from inherited identity to chosen identity is the hinge point on which financial trajectories turn. And here is what makes it both more accessible and more difficult than it sounds. More accessible because it does not require extraordinary intelligence, a perfect upbringing, or a lucky break. It requires awareness and decision, and then the sustained, imperfect work of building new evidence for the new identity. More difficult because the inherited identity does not surrender quietly. It is encoded in the nervous system. It is reinforced by memory, by the people around you, by every moment your brain reaches for familiar patterns under stress. Changing it is not a single decision, it is a sustained campaign. Fought inside your own mind, every day, often without anyone else knowing the battle is happening. Now let me give you something concrete, because I do not want this to stay at the level of abstraction. I want to give you the actual psychological tools that make this shift possible. The first tool is what I call identity evidence collection. The brain updates its sense of identity not through declarations, but through evidence. Specifically through behavioral evidence, things you actually did. Not things you thought about doing, not intentions, actions. This means that the path to a new financial identity is built through small, consistent actions that are inconsistent with the old identity. Every time you look at your account balance without flinching, that is evidence. Every time you make a financial decision from clarity rather than fear, that is evidence. Every time you research an investment, start a savings habit, have an honest money conversation, that is evidence. None of these individual actions will change your bank account overnight. But together, accumulated over weeks and months, they change something more fundamental. They change what your brain believes is true about you. And what your brain believes is true about you determines everything that follows. The second tool is RAS reprogramming. Remember the reticular activating system, the filter that decides what information reaches your consciousness. You can deliberately influence what it filters for, not through wishful thinking. Through specific, repeated, concrete focus. Every morning before you engage with the world, ask yourself one question. Not how do I make more money today, something more specific, something like, what opportunity am I not seeing because I have been trained not to look for it? What evidence exists right now that financial progress is possible for me? What would someone who is building wealth notice in my situation today that I am currently filtering out? These questions are not affirmations, they are instructions to the RAS. They tell your brain what to look for. And the brain, given clear instructions, is extraordinarily good at finding exactly what it is looking for. The third tool is environment engineering. We have talked in previous videos about how the poverty mindset spreads through mirror neurons, through the emotional atmosphere of the people we are closest to. The same mechanism works in reverse. Deliberately and consistently exposing yourself to environments where financial growth is normalized, where people who started with less talk openly about building more, gives your mirror neurons new material. New emotional templates, new evidence that the financial world operates differently than your inherited template suggested. This does not mean abandoning the people you love. It means expanding your world to include people and environments that reflect back a different possibility. One community, one conversation, one voice, that is enough to start. Because the brain does not need a dramatic overhaul to begin updating. It just needs new data, consistent, credible, emotionally resonant data that contradicts the old story. And every piece of that data is a crack in the inherited template. And cracks let light in. Now I want to address something directly. Because someone watching this right now is thinking, this sounds good, but I have tried to change my relationship with money before. And it did not work. I hear that, and I want to say something clearly in response. The reason most attempts to change financial behavior fail is not a lack of willpower. It is not a lack of desire, it is that they are made at the wrong level. They are made at the behavioral level, at the level of habits and actions, without addressing the identity level that is driving those habits and actions. You can impose new financial behaviors through sheer force of will for a while. But the identity underneath, unchanged, unexamined, still running, will eventually reassert itself. Because identity is more powerful than habit, always. The only lasting change is identity change, and identity change requires the three things we just discussed. Behavioral evidence, directed attention, environmental expansion, not one of them. All three simultaneously over time. This is the work. It is not glamorous. It does not make for inspiring Instagram posts, but it is real. And it works at the level where the problem actually lives. Here is what I want you to take from this video. 93% of people will never build meaningful wealth. But not because they are not capable. Because they are operating from a financial identity they never chose, one that was installed before they were old enough to question it, and one that has been quietly filtering out possibility ever since. You now understand that mechanism. You now have the tools to begin interrupting it. And understanding, even the beginning of understanding, changes what is possible. Not everything, not overnight, but something real, something that was not available to you before you pressed play. Use it. The 7% is not a fixed club. It is not determined by birth or background or luck. It is determined by a decision made quietly, seriously, without fanfare, to stop living inside an inherited story about money and to start writing a new one. That decision is available to you right now. If this video named something real for you, if it showed you something you could not unsee, comment the number 7 below. As a declaration, as a commitment to yourself that you are choosing to be part of that 7%. Not because it is easy, because you finally understand what it actually takes. Hit the like button as a promise to yourself that this moment matters. And subscribe, because this is what we do here. We go deeper than the surface. We have the honest conversations about money and psychology that actually change trajectories. 93% will scroll past this, 7% will do something with it. You already know which one you are.